Stay tuned to find out how to create this lovely autumn field scene. I've got a really simple autumn field scene here. The trees are just starting to turn. We've got a lovely blue sky today, so I've just taken this photo. Around where we live, it's quite agricultural, so we get a lot of crops being cut. So the things change quite a lot at this time of year. But the sky is beautiful, and the colours within the trees and the fields are all starting to change. So I thought it'd be a good, simple subject for us to do today. I've got a very loose drawing. I have accentuated this line going down the horizon line, and then I've got this line of the lower field and a line here just to accentuate where that hedge is going to be. I've got the tractor run marks and this tree here and this tiny bit of foreground there. So I've squirted out neat paint today, so I'm going to use that as I go along. I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques. I'll pop the drawings up on screen, so you'll be able to screenshot those and print them off if you want to, the photograph as well. So I'm coming on with some water. I'm going to get that all over the sky. I'm coming down to the horizon line, and I'm going to come through that tree as well. Make sure I've got plenty of water, and I'm using a Saunders Waterford cotton paper. It's rough. I've got a round number 10. I'm dipping it, loading it with water, and I'm just going to dab into some cobalt blue. So this is nice and strong, perfect colour. Circular motion. So I'm going to come on and do a circular motion. Now I'm going to show you today, dipping back into the water, some techniques that I use to get harder edged clouds rather than the softer edge. But I am going to leave some of the white. Come down to this line here and come all the way along there. It's hard to do a bit of a circular motion when you're down at that side. Right, when you're doing this technique, it's quite nice to leave some of the paper a little bit whiter, but not essential. You can cover the whole paper and then lift out. The trick is to get anything lifted out quickly before it starts to dry. So I'm just taking in a little bit more neater colour now, just to power some of the areas up, especially towards the top. So you can see that circular motion in there. Okay, I've got a cotton wool ball here, and this is what I'm going to use to start to lift out some of the clouds. So you can use the cotton wool ball, you can use kitchen towel. This works in the same way. This is just a softer way of doing it. The kitchen towel leaves a harder edge. In fact, I'll show you a bit of kitchen towel as well, so you get to see both techniques. The technique is pretty much the same. So if you've got a bit of kitchen towel, you're just gonna, you can see that harder edge. You get a harder edge with kitchen towel, a softer edge. So I'll do a combination of both. If you can see the way that I'm dabbing, I'm twisting the same way that I would use a sponge. I don't want it to all look the same. You will need to keep getting little bits of kitchen towel because it needs to be clean when you're doing this. So this bit here should be quite soft, so I'm not going to take too much from here. So it's giving me harder edges and softer edges. The cotton wool is much more blended. You get a much more blended edge. Just need to keep checking it, that it's clean enough that you can carry on. Softer and blended. And then the other thing that I've got is some cotton buds, which I'm going to use in a minute. So you can use a combination. I'll get a sharper edge here. I'm looking where the sharper edges are. And it's really nice to get that combination of hard and soft edges. As you come further down, these bits get smaller. So you've got to get a smaller bit of kitchen towel if you're doing a harder edge. But it's just finding a clean bit and making sure you're doing that little bit of a twist. Let me show you with the cotton bud. So with the cotton bud, again, it's softer, but you can sort of just drag it along and it creates these lovely wispy bits. You do need to keep swapping your cotton buds. Again, once you get too much paint on, you've got to swap. You get these lovely, nice little wispy bits. Quite a nice way to get those, really. Go through about 3 cotton buds with this one. You can do some little wispy bits up here. So it's sort of a dragging motion. And if you use the side of the cotton bud, it's a bit easier. You can roll little bits like this to dab off as well. It's just finding what works for you. I'm going to grab a round number 6. Just pick up a little bit of the sap green and a little bit, and this is ultramarine blue. Just want a nice dark green. I've just dabbed them together. Whilst it's still wet, I just want to get these trees that are in the very distance just dabbed in on the horizon. It's just a few. I'm going to rinse my brush out, just dab it off on the kitchen towel. Then just take another bit of water. I'm just going to come in to just sap green, and I'm going to do similar over here. Now this is a foreground tree and I want a little bit of a softness within it, and because I'm doing the sky at this moment, I'm going to get that little bit of softness within the top of this tree. So I've taken sap green in with my brush still loaded with the sap green, and I'm just going to dip into some burnt sienna. And this is going to start to give it that autumnal feel. So the mix of the sap green and burnt sienna is less vibrant. Just knocks it back a little bit, but it's that mix of colours as things are changing. You're getting that mix of colour. And that's just doing that top half of the tree. So then when we come to do the rest of it, it's going to blend quite nicely. So picking up my round number 10, I'm going to get some water on. Come in this bottom section now, so while that one's starting to dry, I'll just come into this bottom section. So I've left that field in between and this tree line, this tree here, I'm leaving that for now. I'm just getting some colour into the bottom section. So round number 10, loaded with water, and I'm going to dip into the raw sienna. So we're going to get a base of the raw sienna on horizontal strokes. Those sort of fresh yellow colours now are gone as we're coming into autumn. So we're all about the muted yellows. Raw sienna being one of my favourites. I'm going to take a little bit of the sap green and just stroke that through where I can see the areas of green. Horizontalish strokes. I'm following the line of the land. I'm going to dip straight into the burnt sienna. Just bring this in this foreground area here. So that's going to give a little bit of warmth straight away and shoot this a bit further forwards. If I take a little bit of the burnt sienna, a little bit of the ultramarine, dab together, I'm going to get a browny grey colour, and then this can go towards the back. So a dab of burnt sienna, a dab of ultramarine. It's basically like a mucky brown, but it works perfectly. And the ultramarine granulates a little bit, which has a really nice effect as well. So a dab of burnt sienna, a dab of ultramarine, mix them together. So I'm not rinsing my brush at all. I'm going to take some of this dark down here. It's just a darker mucky brown. Rinse that brush out. I'm going to pick up a number 6 now. Again, a dab of ultramarine, a dab of burnt sienna. So I've got this dark mucky brown. What I want to do is start to create a little bit of foreground interest. So whilst it's still damp, I'm going to bring in a few upward strokes. You can turn upside down to do this if you find it easier. They don't need to be too fine, so I'm just going to run with it like this. Then I want you to look at the tracks. So with that round number 6, I'm going to paint in the tracks. Again, it's still damp. If you start at the back and then come forwards, then if you lift off and it explodes a little bit, it's going to be in the foreground where it needs to be wider. That accentuation of that line. You're just giving it a really nice flow. Just keep mixing up, dabbing into both. I'm going to take a little bit of shadow just in places horizontally, just on this left hand side, because there are there's a few hints of shadow. Give that bit of a rinse. Dip into some sap green. So this is still my round number 6. Because it's neat paint, you will see it come through. So I'm just going to bring up a little bit of that into the foreground as well. Okay, I'm going to dry that one off. Okay, so that's nicely dry. So we're going to come in to this middle section now. Get a base on. I'll start with the raw sienna. This is the nice light field now. So I'll keep that nice and light. I'm going to take the raw sienna just over that section as well. I'm using my round number 10. I'm going to take a little bit of the sap green into this section here. A little bit of sap green just down in this bottom of this section here. Going to drop down to my number 6. I'm going to take a little bit of the sap green, a little bit of the ultramarine. So you're making a really nice thick mix. And if you take a tiny touch of burnt sienna in, it'll just make it look a little bit more autumnal. Okay, and then we're going to start with the dabbing action again, just at the bottom of this field, to start to create the trees that we can see at this edge. Vary the height of them, they're all different heights, and it's just that dab, dab, dabbing action all the way along. As you're starting here, they're going to be bigger, and as you go further away, they're going to get smaller. So it's all about scale. So we're going to keep them smaller. See a few trees within this bit, so I'll add a few more. We've got this hedgerow just here coming down, so we're going to get that in. Take a bit more blue into the mix. You can add a bit of tone into these ones. Get a little bit of tone into those. This edge is really important, this bottom edge. So that's accentuating that field. So just take a little bit of time just to check you've got a nice edge there. Just take that through, makes all the difference. If this goes a bit shooty, in places it's a little bit wet and it's gone a bit shooty, you can just run the brush through, you can leave it as is. I think some trees it works, some trees it doesn't, so it's up to you really on that bit. And then what I'm going to do is take a 1 centimetre flat. I'm going to dip into sap green, so that's loaded with sap green. I'm going to dip into a little bit of the burnt sienna, and I'm just going to start to dab on here. Now I'm going to come higher than where I've got this damp, because I'm going to bring it into the other tree, the bit that we did earlier. So lay my brush up with sap green, a little bit of burnt sienna, it's that similar colour, and I'm going to bring it up and through. Sap green, burnt sienna, bring it up and through. Sap green, there's a little bit too much burnt sienna there, so I won't bring any more in there. Just going to break that edge up, bringing it up. I'm going to start to get a really nice effect there. If I drop to a number 6, I've got that burnt sienna mix, burnt sienna and ultramarine. I'm just going to dot in underneath this tree line. So I want this to be a little bit darker, because that's going to help to accentuate that field. And I want to bring some of that in and blend it through. So this is fairly thick for watercolour, but it does work when you're doing these foreground trees. Okay, with a damp brush, because this line is quite hard, I'm just going to just dab in and blend. So wet brush, dab and blend. The paint's quite thick, so there's some way to move it. You've some leeway to add water when it's thick paint. And it would just help it blend in places. So I'm just dabbing in an odd bit of water just into the thick paint. If you take it onto diluted paint, it's a watermark, but within here it just blends the thick paint. And then with a clean brush, I just want you to pull on that bottom edge across horizontally, so you get that feeling that that's bits of shadow and it's connecting all of this area. Okay, so now if I pick up my rigger, actually just before I do that, I'm just going to accentuate this line a little bit more. So this is that mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine. I'm just going to bring in, because I think it just adds to the composition, these tractor lines. And the way that they flow really add to the composition. So I'm just making it a little bit thicker there. It gives you a real sense of distance. And then if I rinse the brush, pop some water on, I'm just going to run water down one edge. So if I choose the right hand side, that's just going to soften it in enough that it looks like it's part of the surface rather than a line I've painted on top. You can see that just blending now. I'm going to twizzle this way because I find it easier to paint these grasses in to a point upside down. So resting on my little finger, I've got a little bit of sap green to start with, and I'm using a rigger. I'm just stroking upwards. So we're just going to build up a little bit of detail just in this foreground corner. Take a bit of the raw sienna into the mix. And then I want this dark brown colour, so this is the ultramarine and the burnt sienna. And get some light strokes. Vary which way they go. It's not freshly mown, it's wild. Vary the heights. Got some little bits coming up and over the field now. I'll twizzle back round now. Pop a few more in. It's a really simple, effective autumn scene, showing you a different way how to do trees. So just looking at this now, this has spread quite a bit, and I think it's important you know how to fix this. So that's because it's been quite wet. So what I'm doing now is with a nearly dry brush, I'm pushing it back and blending and dabbing. And this will just stop it flowing any further. I'm controlling the water. These things happen, it's just knowing how to stop it and how to fix it. And let's just stop that now. Okay, I'm just going to dry that one off. Okay, so this is beautiful as it is now. It's a lovely simple watercolour scene. But there is something else I can do just to connect this field and give it a little bit more warmth. So I've took a bit of that mucky brown and a little bit more of the burnt sienna in, and I've got a glaze. Now you have to make sure that this is totally dry before you do a glaze. So it's basically a watery, warm colour. You just got to make sure you've got plenty there because you don't want to run out halfway. And that it's very well mixed on the brush. You don't want to streak like I've got there. And then what I'm going to do is come in and accentuate some shadow. So this is my wash brush that I'm using. I'm going to come across and just glaze the field basically. So I'm going to leave an odd little bit. I don't really want that in the sky. An odd bit towards that left hand side that's a bit lighter, but coming across most of this. And then what's that going to do is give a sense of distance, a sense of shadow. It's going to bring this forward because it's in the foreground, this extra boldness, and it's going to give a highlight to that field at the back. So that field instantly at the back looks lighter now, and it works much better as a picture. So the trick is to be quite careful when you're coming in. And don't come over it too many times. I'm just levelling out those couple of lines. And then as this dries, you'll see, it'll just give it a much better sense of distance and shadow. So I'll just dry that off and then mount it for you to see. So there we go. So that's a beautiful turning autumn scene of the fields. A nice simple one for you to do as a beginner, with a variety of techniques in there for you to try. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll pop you another one here if you want to have a go at another one. Please like, subscribe and share, and I'll see you again next time.